Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Mr. Jane, and you're watching Electric Avenue. This is episode number 9. This is the August 2023 wrap up, and I know we are recording this in the mid of September, which definitely means that Tata Nexon EV has been launched, but we're not going to talk about it in this episode. That'll be for next month. But, anyways, as usual, we're going to cover 4 areas, so let's just jump right into it. So here are the 4 topics we're going to cover for August 2023. We are going to talk about the monthly registration numbers. Then we'll talk about recent EV news and launches. And then we're going to mix it up. Usually I do the EV car spotting in number 4, and then the deep dive is number 3. But now we're going to kind of start doing the deep dives at the end of each episode that I do. So number 3 will be EV car spotting. And this is going to be interesting because this is the first and only Tesla Model S in the country. And number 4 is a deep dive. This is a little interesting that I'm going to do this month. Is I got access to the Blume Ventures EV deck, and they talk about the electric vehicle space in depth. And I thought it'd be great to kind of run through the deck. It's a very long one, so I'm going to do a very condensed version. Just the things that I find interesting, I'm going to talk about. So these are the 4 areas. Let's get into it. Let's first jump into the monthly registration numbers. Okay, here we are. These are the EV car sales in India. This is the first 5 months from April to August 2023. And I know I say this every time that it's just getting old, that the Tata Nexon or the Tata Group is always number 1 with their 3 EVs. And again, they are number 1 at around 4,600 units, and it's been a kind of a fall from July. But overall, as you can see, you've got MG Motors, M&M, Mahindra with their XUV 400, which is, still doing decent, by the way. It's not a great car, but, they probably have to release some sort of EV, and they've done it. Hyundai with their Ioniq 5, and Kona is at 183. Citroen, it's got 112. BYD, very surprising that we've got such a big dip. If you look at, back in May and June, they're doing around 200s, and now we're down to, in double digits in August. I guess the Atto 3 is not doing as well as they expected. BMW, Volvo, and Kia all doing, decent amounts, and nothing much to write home about. Benz is at around 20 units. And then, of course, Audi has got 13. Porsche, which is kind of surprising. I feel this data may be a little bit flawed. So that means, the Porsche Taycan has gone from a couple units in June, July to 10 in August, which would be a great thing if it is, but I'm not really sure. Anyways, a lot of the data, like I said, is, it's actually, I wouldn't say these are the numbers that are the gospel, but I would say they're pretty accurate. And a lot of it comes from evreporter.com, from the Vahan portal, from FADA, and the OEMs. So this is a very good approximation. I wouldn't say exactly that Tata Motors sold 4,623 units in August, but a pretty close approximation. I can definitely tell you they didn't sell 56,000 or they didn't sell 5. So this is kind of gives you a good idea. But overall, I'd say we're looking at probably close to 6,000 EV four-wheelers in the country, which ain't bad, but I'm hoping we can at least 10x that in the next couple years. So that is the EV car sales for August 2023. Okay, we are now on to EV news and any new launches. Usually I don't have a lot in this section, but this month there's actually quite a bit. So let's just start off with the first one, which is Mahindra to launch their Born electric EV with BYD blade cells. Now, this is kind of a departure because what has happened was back in August, they mentioned that they were going to launch their InGlow platform, and it was going to be based on Volkswagen's MEB platform. So my guess is 2 things have happened is they were going to work with Volkswagen both on the platform side and on the battery side, but there must have been some sort of delays, and now they're going to use BYD batteries, but still probably use the MEB platform. All in all, this just seems like more delays, more delays, more delays. So, all these amazing vehicles that we see here are all probably going to get delayed to some extent, because that just means that they probably had an idea that they were going to release it on certain date, and now that's getting pushed because of these delays from the Volkswagen side, or actually who knows what side that is. But bottom line, that is what is happening with Mahindra and their announcement of the platform they call InGlow, which is kind of surprising. You would have thought they would have called it IndiGlow, India and Global, but I'm guessing there must have been some sort of naming rights issues there, so they went with InGlow, which is kind of a lame attempt at Indian at heart and global in its reach. Anyways, next we have got is another article from Mahindra. Is they finally launched, or they show the concept of their Jeep Tar, called the Tar E. It's kind of a weird name, but it looks really nice. When you see it, you're kind of like, wow, I'll be okay with the name. But if that's what they actually release, I would love to get this car. Looks really good. So this is going to be all electric, their Jeep version. So let's see if it actually happens. Like I said, these all look great, when people are talking about it in a PowerPoint presentation, or, when they're presenting it, but when it actually, where the rubber meets the road, let's see what actually happens. So they had a presentation. They brought a bunch of journalists down to Cape Town, and they talked about, their EV strategy, and that's when they talked about the BYD batteries, and then they also talked about the Tar E. So let's see. Hopefully it actually happens. Another article that's not really EV related, but I think it's great. We finally, you always hear about crash protection and crash ratings. You always hear about NCAP, which stands for New Car Assessment Program, and you always hear about global NCAP. You hear about Euro NCAP. Finally, we're getting Bharat NCAP, which basically means that the testing will actually be done in India versus, sending it out of the country, and, the costs kind of escalate. And I believe this testing will be done in Pune at a facility that is monitored by ARAI, I believe. So let's see what actually happens with it. But this is kind of what it looks like. There'll be a sticker. And God, I hope this sticker is not on the car, because people just refuse to remove stickers from their car, and I don't know why. But hopefully this is something that is kind of an insert in the car, and then people can just throw it away. But it'll actually show you the star rating, and hopefully it's not as confusing as the energy star ratings that we see for like refrigerators and air conditioning units. Hopefully it's a very simple rating. But more importantly, I believe this is not mandatory on all cars. It's if you sell more than 30 cars, then you can opt for it. I'm not really sure all the specifications of it, but I really hope all the automotive journalists, the auto magazines, the YouTubers actually will, show that a car has not gone through the Bharat NCAP testing, and also make that almost like a negative rating, because this will really force the car makers to make sure that every one of their vehicles gets to the NCAP rating, and I think it's a good thing. So let's hope it happens, because really, cars should be made safer as, people are driving faster and faster. We've got highways where people can go up to 120, 140, 150, and really we should have safer roads, and this NCAP rating would really help towards that. So let's see. Next up is Tata Motors has finally shipped 1 lakh vehicles, or 100,000 EVs, which is actually a great testament. I would have loved to seen their business plan for launching the EV models, and I'm hoping either they're exceeding it or tracking what they initially expected. But 1 lakh is not bad. Let's see what they can do moving forward. And then the last piece around Tata is they have renamed or rebranded Tata Passenger Electric Mobility to something that is actually much more cooler, and this is called Tata EV. So Tata.EV is the brand for all of their electric vehicles, and then all the individual vehicles will be .EV as well. So if I'm not mistaken, it'll be called the Tata.EV Nexon.EV. Kind of confusing. Not really sure if I'm digging it, but whatever. That's kind of where we are. At least it's better than Tata Passenger Electric Mobility, which is a freaking mouthful. Last on the news is the Audi Q8 e-tron. This is, of course, the high-performance version of the e-trons that are sold in India. But to be honest with you, I couldn't find much as far as a huge, spectacular boost in torque. So what I guess is this is more of just kind of a more aggressive look on the e-trons, with the front grille, you've got this, then you've got, this is kind of very sporty looking here on the side. But as far as the specs, is it like much faster? I don't think so. So I think it's just more of a body kit refresh on it, and that's it. It does look good. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's like all that amazing as opposed to the other e-trons that are out there, whether it's the 50 or the 55. And that's a wrap for the news for August 2023. Next up on the list is number 3, which is EV car spotting. This one is the only Tesla Model S in the country. I think it came here a couple of years ago. This is a great shot from the front. This is just coming off the C-Link. It's got the green plates. When this car first came to India, it had the white plates because at that time, green plates were not mandatory for EV vehicles. And then you can see here, this is what it looks like on the back. So it looks really good. It's a Model S. And this is the 100D version. So dual motor setup. This was released in 2018, and the 0 to 100 kilometers is in 4.2 seconds. And you all know my love for the Model S Plaid, which does that same thing in 1.9 seconds. But even 4.2 is damn fast for a four-door sedan. No points for guessing who owns this. I think I've mentioned it many times, but this is the Ambani family. They've got 2 Teslas. They've got this, and they've also got the Model X. But this one looks really amazing, and I actually did not take pictures of this car. This, I believe, was somebody had sent it to me. I can't remember the person. It might have been Nurmeet Patel. I'm not sure, but a lot of people send me pictures of cars, and this was one of them. So this is the car spotting for the month of August. There you go. Looks pretty amazing, is all I can tell you. It's that time for number 4, which is the deep dive. And this one's a little unique this month because I was searching for some other stuff around the electric vehicle space, and then I came across this monster deck from Blume Ventures, which talks about demystifying the Indian EV ecosystem. And I was kind of like, wow, kind of floored by it because it's 187 slides long. And at first it's very intimidating, but I kind of said, let me just sit down, break it down by section, and kind of come up with what I find some of the more interesting things to talk about. So just real quick, if you're interested in getting this deck as well, you can point your camera to this QR code here and just download it. I think the QR code sends you to a DocSend link, and then you just have to enter in your email address, I believe, and then just get the deck. So very cool. As I said, the title is Demystifying the Indian EV Ecosystem. It was actually put together by Blume Ventures, which is a very, very well-respected venture capital firm here in Bombay. And this one was done by 2 of their colleagues, Arpit Agarwal and Venkatesh Modi. And it breaks it up into 6 parts, as I mentioned. So first is, the EV Basics 101, then the OEM business models, then the EV distribution business. Then it talks about charging and swapping infra. Then a big piece is financing. So it talks about how people finance the vehicles because the industry right now is really around logistics and B2B users. And then the 4th one is around EV battery recycling. So what I thought I'd do is I kind of go through it and highlight some of what I thought were the more interesting slides. But if you're really keen on the EV space, I would highly recommend getting the deck and just taking a look at it because they go through a lot of great stuff. Even some that's kind of above my head, but it's really good. So the first one was, what is an EV? Now, I will not be, I will not lie. When I saw this slide, I was kind of like, well, wait a minute. I don't think anyone calls this battery-enabled vehicles BEVs. I've always heard BEVs as battery electric vehicles. So I kind of had to just do a Google and say, okay, let me see when I type in battery-enabled vehicles, what do I get? And sure enough, I got battery electric vehicles. So I feel like, these guys are the only ones that reference it as battery enabled. They must have a reason for it. But anyways, it just talks about what are the different components in the vehicle, and what makes up, the major parts of a battery electric vehicle. This is a slide that I thought was really interesting because it really talks about the total cost of ownership of a four-wheeler passenger EV. I know everyone always talks about, the initial, capital expenditure, but a lot of the OpEx people kind of forget about. And so this kind of covers the overall total cost as far as buying the vehicle, and then, what are your running costs? What are your energy costs? What are the maintenance, the salvage, all of that stuff. So it's a really good, and I think this is what's missing with a lot of people is, when they first look at the cost of an EV, they're like, oh, the petrol diesel version is so much cheaper than an EV, and then the EVs are more expensive. But then when you kind of factor in a lot of these different costs, I'm not saying it's even or cheaper, but at some point it will get there. But when you look at the total cost of ownership, that's where this really starts to make sense. Getting an EV. As I mentioned, that first slide talks about the different components, but this really breaks it down as far as a percentage of the bill of materials, or what they call the BOM, right here. So you really have, four key components. One is the battery pack, and that's the biggest one. So when you don't own that technology and you're just buying it from someone else, that is really not how you scale a company. And I think that's where Tesla is kind of moving towards. And I think that's where every company that is doing something in the electric vehicle space will need to really own that technology. They'll need to own that chemistry, the composition of the cell, the battery cell into a pack, and all of that needs to be done. Second is the electric motor. Third is the powertrain, and then you've got the inverter, and then somewhere in there is the overall battery management system, what they call the BMS. But more than anything is, like I said, is the battery pack is the biggest cost. And that's where everyone's really trying to figure out how they can innovate, whether they're using LFP batteries, they're using nickel cadmium, they're using titanium. I mean, it's crazy. Like I said, I've always said, who knows, maybe the dirt in Rajasthan could be, the key to having really cheap batteries. People are looking at salt or sodium batteries. So there's a lot of different things, and there's a reason why, because the biggest cost in a car is 35 to 50% is the battery pack. Now, as we talk about the chemistry, this is really where we're talking is going to really come down, and that is the overall trend of the battery pack over the next 10 years. And you can see it's just going down, down, down. And that's a combination of, increased manufacturing efficiency, more products being manufactured, and then also the number of different competing technologies in the battery chemistry space. And so here we are today, right around here, and you can see that the prices they're saying right now are hovering around $175 per kilowatt hour, and they're anticipating is going to drop to 82. So that is pretty good, and that's what we're all betting on, that the battery prices continue to go down. So battery prices continue to go down, and then the car prices continue to go down, and efficiency gets better. I thought this was a really good slide because it kind of talks about, the overall key players in the EV value chain. So they call it personas, but that's probably coming from a venture capital standpoint. But these are, you can call them players. So who are the different players in the EV space? As I mentioned, we talked about the cell manufacturer, then the battery assembler. So the cell manufacturer is the most critical piece. Then you've got people that assemble the battery pack with their battery management system, or the BMS. Then you've got the OEMs that do both hardware, software. Then you've got the dealer. Then you've got CPOs, or charging point operators, which in India would be GOBP or Tata Power. They're actually the locations where you get your electricity from when you're traveling across the country. Then you've got your charging network operator, the financier, and then obviously you in the end, which is the vehicle owner. So these all 8 people kind of play a huge part in the overall EV ecosystem. And it's kind of nice how they broke it down, because even I wasn't really aware of the difference between a CPO and a charging network operator. So that was kind of interesting to see that, the charging network operator is an aggregator of the CPOs. Next up is the type of OEMs that are out there. And, they talk about vertically integrated, which is like an iOS where everything is in-house. And a perfect example of that would be Tesla. They do everything. And this is something that I've harped on again and again and again. I'm really hoping Tata's kind of fall into that in the future where they could own everything because they actually have all the different pieces. They just need to kind of collectively put them together. Then the other one is you've got an open architecture. This is very similar to the Android ecosystem. And here you've got all the different original design manufacturers. So here they're talking about Ampere, they're talking about Okinawa. These are the two-wheelers. And these are, different ways of doing it. So one is the vertical integration, and then the other one is a very open architecture. And then the second to the last slide really talks about the mature state of software data and automation and implementation. So for me, this is exciting because this really talks about, the technology side, the flow of the data going to the car, coming from the car. Where do you store the data? Is it on board? Is it in a cloud platform? And so, there's really 4 tiers to it. At the very end, you've got the actual vehicle that is taking in all of the data. So that's at the vehicle level. And then within the vehicle, you've got different components that are actually doing that. And then within the components, you've actually got the onboard controllers, the 4G chips, all of that. And then the last piece is you've got the cloud, which is taking in all of that information and it's processing it. Now, a lot of the stuff, if you look at Tesla's fully self-driving FSD, that does a lot of the processing locally. And then it sends, probably some of the data to the cloud. So there's always going to be what they call edge processing versus cloud processing. Cloud processing is great, but it's also expensive. Whereas if you have the smarts at the edge, nothing like it. And I think that's where we're going to see a combination of both of them, where you've got the smarts at the edge, and also you can kind of see stuff at a cloud level to do the processing and get higher level analytics of all of your data. And the last slide, this is, interesting only from the standpoint it shows you that the different types of charging sockets that are out there. So if you look at, for a 4-wheeler vehicle, you've got something called Type 2 AC, CHAdeMO, and CCS. Now I believe it's called CCS2. But CHAdeMO has been around for quite some time, but it's going away or it's completely gone. In fact, I think there's very few people that use CHAdeMO, and everything is moving towards CCS2. What is not shown here on this slide is Tesla, because that's really what the whole world is moving towards Tesla, because they opened it up. And so Ford, GM, all of them are all going the Tesla route. Really not much, because it's really always been CCS2 versus Tesla. And the reason why the US manufacturers are going towards the Tesla format is because then they can use the supercharging network in the US of Tesla. And of course, in India, we probably have no more than a handful, literally a handful, probably 10 Teslas in the entire country. So it doesn't really make sense to focus on the Tesla charging standard. They can use the open standard of CCS and CCS2. But anyways, that is a real brief rundown. As you can see, I covered maybe 9 or 10 slides out of the total of 187 slides in this deck. And like I said, if you have any inkling of learning about the EV ecosystem in India, or just understanding EVs in general, I would highly recommend this deck. Someone told me that this is a yearly deck that they've been doing, so this is the first time I've seen it. I'd love to, and can't wait for the next version to come out. But that's kind of it. So that's the deep dive and looking at demystifying the Indian EV ecosystem by Blume Ventures. And that's a wrap for episode number 9 of Electric Avenue. Till next time, see you later.
Oh no, we're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue, and then